Hello, Exiles. It's here. The release date has been announced February 20th, running until March 23rd, possibly longer. They very quickly reassure us that this could be made longer, also that what's in the event will be available as options in private leagues going forward. So this is almost like a permanent evergreen addition to the game, assuming you can afford a private league. Some other important information, you can change your ascendancy class during the event, so if you pick a character and what you had in mind doesn't work out, you can change ascendancies and make something else work, which I think is very good, because I think it was very possible this wouldn't have been in. Additionally, if you are playing Necro Settlers, you have 1 week. That's pretty rough, because I don't know that that was necessarily announced elsewhere. It might have been, but otherwise, we've got some nice stuff to talk about. For starters, get to level 80, you get an entire cosmetic armor set. Pretty cool looking nature slash plate mail type dealio. And the low res here doesn't really make it look that great. For Path of Exile 1, obviously it looked great. But there will be a higher res version in Path of Exile 2 that you also earn by playing in the event. So if you're not a Path of Exile 1 player, but you were looking for an excuse to maybe check it out, here it is. This will give you something long-term if you don't end up really caring for it after you, experience the end game a little bit. Outside of that, we have 4 new ascendancies: the Scavenger, the Bog Shaman, the Ancestral Commander, and the Behemoth. And I am excited about all of these. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. I am on 3 hours of sleep, so I would definitely like to get through this. Starting with Scavenger, this is honestly a really cool idea for an ascendancy. We've kind of experienced this a little bit already in some of the others, but basically, you're going to get notables based on very well-known unique equipment. And you start here, right in the middle. Just like with normal Scion, your first 2 ascendancy points are not going to take you to a major node. You're just going to get skill points. And honestly, that's fine, especially if this is a decent amount. I already talked about on Aristocrat. Skill points are its flexibility, its power, and Scion kind of needs it because she starts in the middle of the tree, and that can hamper your ability to get around a little bit. And because she's not going to get nodes later that let her go to another starting location, she might need them even more. Now, when you start, you have to go out this way, and you pick basically body armor nodes. And then after that, you can choose either attacks or spells. Rather, you're going to be choosing weapon abilities for attacks or spells. You go up or down, and you'll notice it's 2 points here to get to this wheel, or this wheel, and then only 1 point here. So you have to pick one way to go, either up or down. You can't do both up and down and leave the jewelry section out, which probably fair, because the jewelry section seems a little weak to me personally. But what is here on all sides is still very good and exciting. I mean, right off the bat, Stasis Prison. This is like a super chase item normally, and the effect isn't as good, but it really can't be, because if it was 100% of damage taken recouped his life, I mean, this is for Uber Legion content. This is very top tier stuff. 50% recoup though is still incredibly strong. If you don't know why, the way recoup kind of works, specifically in the case of Mind Over Matter, but also in general with Energy Shield too, 100% of the damage you take from hits is recouped as life. So if your damage is split between multiple resources, you need less recoup for it to matter. So if you're running Mind Over Matter, you actually only need like 25% of damage recouped as life to kind of get 100% of your life back from a hit. 50% is going to be very potent for just topping off again after you get hit. That is assuming you keep your mana up at all times. Additionally, debuffs expire on you 50% faster. That's just generically good in the sense that a lot of bosses and annoying enemies will have effects that fall off a lot quicker and give you more time to, I guess, recover or to get out of a bad situation that's maybe intended to last a little bit longer. I think there's some nasty things that harvest bosses do that really come to mind, where those being shortened might outright do silly things and trivialize the encounter. So I'm kind of excited to see people who take this, how that ends up helping them. After Stasis Prison, we have Cloak of Flame. This one is kind of especially nuts, I feel, because people will use Cloak of Flame, even though this is like the only relevant line of text on it. When you do a top right side tree build, that is to say Witch, Shadow, Ranger, I guess it's over here for you, but that's you have a hard time with physical damage reduction. With 75% fire res, this is effectively 30% physical damage reduction, because you're going to like reduce the damage taken as fire by that amount. That's pretty much common knowledge to any seasoned Path of Exile player, but if you're newer to the game, this is something that kind of fixes the biggest problem you have when you're in that part of the tree. And it's just one notable, and it does everything you need it to. After that, admittedly less exciting, is Foxshade. Foxshade is good, don't get me wrong. If what you want is movement speed, this is very punchy. And because you can have it on any body armor base, same with the other two to be fair, but because you can have it on any body armor base, that 80% increased global evasion is a lot better. Generally speaking, the damage from enemies hitting you is unlucky factor won't be something that you have to worry about too much. But it does technically, I would say, unless you're solidly in the know that something won't one-shot you, you might find that you die a little more suddenly on occasion because of this. You have to be very sure of your defenses, because if you're on full life and you get hit by something big, and there's a chance it can one-shot you, the chance has gone way up because of, damage range and crit and whatnot. Otherwise, movement speed is fantastic. And also, I believe because it's full life and you're full life when you're in town, you have 20% increased movement speed in town, which on its own is incredible quality of life over like a 1 month event in this case. All that said, the most exciting node here is definitely Chevron's Wrappings, because chaos damage taken does not bypass energy shield is the doorway to really high quality low life builds. This lets you go entirely into energy shield, and instead of chaos damage just bypassing, it now hits the energy shield as if it were life. It makes your energy shield no different than life, period. You are going to need chaos resistance, obviously, because chaos damage hurts, but the really big effect of this is it's not just Chevron's Wrappings, it's better than Chevron's Wrappings, because you can have any rare body armor, which will have, I don't know, anywhere from like 400 to, I'd say conservatively, 250 to 500 more energy shield like flat than what the actual body armor does. That's the downside of it, and you're completely negating it while getting all the upsides of going low life, which includes reserving your life to get to low life and getting like free auras and stuff out of it. Last but certainly not least, we have Blunderbore. I've actually talked about this already because we have a shrine related ascendancy in, what was it? Right, in Daughter of Washabi. So getting Blunderbore is kind of a deceptively good thing. A lot of people probably sleep on how effective these buffs are, thinking, oh, Blunderbore isn't that well used of an item. But the reason why it's not used that much is because you need like 600 strength to wear the damn thing. On a character that can't normally get that much strength, this is huge, because with 40% increased buff effect, that's 28% increased maximum life, 28% increased AoE, and another 28% increased damage, which obviously the least exciting of the stats. And then there is the general downside of built-in knockback from the Brutal Shrine. That said, knockback is not always a bad thing. If you are running, say, Glacial Cascade, Sunder, Bladefall, the knockbacks can actually push an enemy to get hit by more overlaps of a progressing skill. Same with Ball Lightning, I think. So Blunderbore has definitely some incredible use cases, especially, again, for like topside trees. I'm looking at this and I'm already feeling Scavenger is going to be kind of more of a spellcaster-focused ascendancy. But that's not to say that you can't do all of this stuff on a melee character. You can definitely do energy shield low life melee characters as well, which might happen because, dang, man, like Chevron's Wrappings, just right there. Now, we're going to come back to this wheel later because this is technically the last wheel. I want to start with the other two and what they do because they're interesting. And we're going to start with the top side one. These are unique modifiers from caster weapons, generally speaking. I think the Fulcrum is a little bit of an odd one out here, but at the same time, its effect is very caster friendly that they've chosen. The most like friendly one is Nycta's Lantern. If you played an Inquisitor, you know what this is. Battle Mage. The damage of your main hand weapon is going to apply to your spells. So if you have like a big physical axe, it adds a ton of physical damage to your spells. This has always been like pretty good, generally speaking, and it's just a generically strong effect. It's not exciting because I mean we've already experienced it. But it is exciting that we can have it on something that isn't an Inquisitor that has other benefits to it. And just Battle Mage combined with easy low life is kind of exciting on its own in a way that the other stuff isn't. Next, we have Cerberus Limb. This is probably one of my favorite uniques in the game that I never have an excuse to play with. So getting it as an effect that's kind of isolated and usable on any character is very nice, because giving up your weapon is usually pretty big. And that's one of the higher points of this ascendancy, is that giving up your weapon for a unique effect is usually not that feasible, but now it is. This specifically interacts with shield. And if you have like enough block chance, first of all, it gives you spell damage leeches life, which is kind of a rare stat. It's not the easiest to get, especially not 0.5% of it. Some of you are probably like 0.5%, that's nothing, but the amount of damage you do in the game compared to your life pool is tremendous. It's actually quite a bit. On top of that, what kind of shield you have is going to get stronger based on the general defenses that it gives you. An armor shield is now going to give you maximum energy shield. About 20% of the armor will be given its energy shield. That's important, and you know what? I'm going to pull up why. So just as an example here, on Settlers right now, you can get a shield with 2,300 armor. 2,300 armor, that's, I mean, 10% of that is 236, right? And then you double it for 20%. So that's like over 2,000 armor, and then like 400 some energy shield as well. And the one thing to keep in mind is that's not actually on the shield, so it won't apply to shield skills, but it is still a massive bonus based on that. You also get armor equal to your evasion rating on an equipped shield, which is already kind of awesome if you want to go that route. And then for energy shield, you can get evasion rating, which evasion rating and energy shield go together very well. If you're doing a low life thing, you want to get a big energy shield, and getting some evasion rating on that character is like a massive bonus to your survivability in maps and the like. So this node is actually tremendously powerful defensively, probably more than a lot of people innately would think. And that doesn't even speak for what hybrid shields can accomplish with this, or unique shields that have especially high values, like Emperor's Vigilance, which gives 1,800 armor and nearly 400 energy shield. On this, that becomes, what is that? Another 360-ish energy shield, and then what? Quadruple the energy shield, so 380 as evasion. So like 1,200 evasion. That's just a buffet of stats to buff your character with. And on something that innately kind of, well, it's not the greatest for blocking, but it is kind of like a low investment blocking situation, because glancing blows and then everything else. It's a powerful combo, to say the least, which is going to be what this ascendancy is defined by. You do not want to play this ascendancy, I feel, if you're not well versed in the game. But if you're following a guide, it's probably going to work very well. And getting right into that, Midnight Bargain is just pure unadulterated summoner value. Is it good enough for me to like recommend this for a summoner? I don't know. Honestly, these are not minions that I play with a lot. Although additional summoned raging spirits is not a stat I see very often, which makes me think perhaps that line of text right there is exciting enough for someone to get that going. Although I believe SRS has been nerfed recently. Zombies is good. The Spectres is very good. That's like guaranteed value, because support Spectres just give incredible buffs, especially in a minion build. And of course, Skeletons can be good. If you know how to play skeleton builds, you generally are going to be running Spectres, and then you're generally going to be running Spectres and then probably also Zombies, if not just Golems, but it's all there. How good this is compared to some of the other stuff is hard for me to say, because again, these are not my minion types. But what is easy to say is that this is incredibly good. Obliteration is automatic clear comfort for the entirety of your character's lifespan. 30% chance to explode, dealing a quarter of their maximum life as chaos damage. That is such an incredible amount, it's almost comical. Just for reference, if you have like 300% increased chaos damage on a character and you take this node, generally speaking, if one thing explodes, it's going to kill everything around it. You probably need a little bit more than that because resistances exist, but you know, you kill one and it pops. And if it kills a few more, then some of them pop, and it's just a chain reaction, right? And if there's a rare in the middle, the rare probably explodes too. The last two, no slouch at all either. The Fulcrum is kind of more interesting, I think, than a lot of the others. Self-Ignite, Self-Chill, and Self-Shock all have unique items that associate with them. I know Winterweave, Self-Chill will let you kind of accelerate your character's action speed. Eye of Innocence and other type items from that kind of unique family will give you bonuses for being ignited. Moko's Embrace is another one of them. And because you're in control of applying those ailments to enemies and then also to yourself, it's going to be very consistent. And then like Malagaro's Restraint for lightning damage, shocking yourself. There's a lot of potential here, and also this lets you convert a physical spell or skill to 100% elemental very easily, which is on its own kind of a strong effect, as long as you can handle the reflected ailments coming back at you, which also on its own takes some investment and some figuring, but is very doable. And once again, kind of saving the best for last. Void Battery. Whole ass Void Battery. This is so stupid. And like, why is so easy to explain. When you play Void Battery, you get 2 of these. You stack the wands. And why? Because the benefits here stack. You can have a 3rd Void Battery now in your Void Battery setup. And one of the biggest things about this is Void Battery normally has a huge reduced spell damage modifier on it, right? And you're supposed to overcome it by stacking tons of power charges. There's no downside here. There's no reduced spell damage. You're just getting a ton more spell damage on a character that probably already wants to run 2 Void Batteries. And like the wands themselves otherwise are pretty well statted. Some global crit and some cast speed, you can't go wrong with that, and then more max power charges. Just from the tree and the ascendancy having 2 Void Batteries, you get 9 power charges. That's 225% increased spell damage per effect. So 3 times over. It's like, it's 675% increased spell damage. Well, 675 minus 160 from holding the 2 wands, but then also kind of offset by another 80 from the implicits of the wand. So about 600 spell damage, which is absurd. I mean, that's such a tremendous amount. And that's not counting how far this will scale if you find more sources of maximum power charges, which absolutely exist. I don't know what the maximum is, but it's going to be... This was already used, right? Dual Void Batteries is already used, and now you can have triple Void Batteries. And one of them doesn't have the downside. Wow. Now, if you don't go to the north side, you come to the south side, right? I could make a joke about that, I won't. You get unique effects from attacks. And some of these I really like, but generally speaking, I kind of hope they would pick stronger effects just because of how, this stuff works. That said, To What Was Felling right away is really nice. When this happens, it generally duplicates most support effects. You kind of have to build around it, right? Things like Ancestral Call don't inherently work with this, but everything else about a skill will be duplicated as is, and the cooldown is relatively short. So this is like actually kind of a pretty sizable more damage multiplier. And in certain situations, specifically I used it for Infernal Blow, it helps with building up the charges on the skill to like get to the explosion pop. So To What Was Felling, very cool. Just kind of an easy to understand, relatively speaking, effect that's going to make your character feel stronger immediately. Sinvicta's Metal, I wasn't expecting to see this here. If you like Rampage, you like Sinvicta's Metal. Yeah, I mean, the biggest downside of Sinvicta's Metal is that the axe itself doesn't have the best base damage, and at some point you have to replace it. So getting this on a character and being able to keep it forever is very nice, because Rampage gives you some nice benefits. If you're unfamiliar with Rampage, it's like a kill streak effect. This was actually a league way back in the day, back when leagues were very simple. Not a very well-received league, but the mechanic is well-received because what it does is very fun and interesting to use. And essentially, when you get 20 stacks, you get another 1% movement speed and another 2% damage. The damage is kind of negligible. The movement speed is not. You feel the loss of this when you give up Rampage somewhere. But having that movement speed is good on its own. The actual Rampage effects are crazy because when you hit certain kill streak breakpoints, crazy effects will go off. Sometimes you'll have like an effect that'll chain through enemies, that'll do an AoE burst, and you'll kill huge packs. If the screen is dense enough, you can actually wipe out an entire screen just packed full of stuff because of a Rampage proc, which is great. Some of the other effects you can get: Nova of Spears that stun everything, Detonate Dead effects, Cyclones that fight. Damaging Novas, which I believe are centered on your character. So just like while you're running around, you're doing more damage. Animated Bows. It's just crazy. And like the effects get stronger as you get to higher kill streaks. It's a Zoom playstyle like benefit that gets stronger and stronger as time goes on. And usually the problem with Rampage is that the items you get it on fall off or need to be replaced. Having it as part of an ascendancy is kind of interesting. But is it better than the other stuff here? Kind of hard to say. If all you're about is clear speed, the answer is very possibly yes, though. Starforge. This one honestly does not live up to the hype of the actual unique item. Your physical damage can shock is like, I mean, that's a nice effect. You don't have the downside of deal no non-physical damage, and you get 20% increased area of effect, but that's not that good. It really isn't. I almost feel like this is what you take when nothing else matters. Like, if I were doing a Rampage build, but I had to kill bosses, I'd be like, all right, well, I do physical damage. Let's switch to Starforge. Otherwise, I don't think Starforge is the best here. The other stuff here is much more exciting. Soul Taker immediately, the iconic insufficient mana doesn't prevent your melee attacks. Your mana goes to 0, you keep going. You don't care. And that on its own is very strong. Physical damage can chill is also very, very good. There's some effects in the game that benefit from this in ways that aren't the most intuitive if you're a newer player. The hypothermia support gives more damage to everything as long as the enemy is chilled. And chill in general is just a really strong effect for increasing your survivability, especially against like a boss. If you're chilling a boss effectively, you're reducing their attack speed or cast speed by an effective percent, and just that you're taking that much less damage over time. Doomfletch is pure gas. This is not as strong as the actual Doomflesh modifier, but it can't be, not if you get to choose your weapon. The downside of Doomfletch is that the weapon has low base damage, and you're supposed to go find added physical damage elsewhere. On an item that already has really good physical damage, 60% of weapon physical damage as extra damage is really good. I love to say is really good, and I get to say that a lot lately. Lucky me. This is this is like the most genuine form of gas in this whole little wheel here. You don't really have to think about it as long as you're not running Brutality. This kills. And if you are running Brutality, then you're probably like, all right, I guess I take Starforge. That's assuming you've fixed your mana and a bunch of other things. This really just doesn't feel that good to me. I hope I'm missing something with this, because this is not that exciting. I guess, to be fair, if you get your physical damage high enough, you have incredible stun and high value shocks, and maybe that makes this a little better than I give it credit for. But Doomfletch is just outright good. It also is going to give you a very large sampling of each element, so shocking, igniting, and chilling are all going to happen very organically. If you have crit, freezing will happen as well. If you have the scorch, brittle, sap, you can get those effects going. It's just kind of there for free. I'm guessing you want to do this on something that is converting all of its damage to a specific element anyways. There's a lot of skills that are physical, and you can get smatterings of conversion elsewhere and kind of stack them together to create a multi-element build. And if you balance that, you could potentially even run the Trinity support, which most people think of for spells, but it is not for spells. Trinity, as long as you have two different elements basically doing the highest damage on a given hit, alternating, this is like one of the best supports in the game by a huge mile. You're going to get, what is it? I believe it's 30% more elemental damage and 16% elemental resistance penetration, which is like doubly extra good, because usually the downside of running all these different elements is that you have to like suffer through your opponent having good resistances to part of your attacks. And last but certainly not least, possibly the most exciting one here, especially if you're a Flicker Strike enjoyer, Oro Sacrifice. Oro's is a little bit infamous because it has a pretty major downside to it. It causes you to take additional damage. Not having that downside, getting to choose any weapon, and only having the requirement of igniting stuff means the most reliable form of Frenzy Charge generation pretty much in the game. I think Terminus Est on critical is probably a tiny bit more reliable, because I'm sure there are enemies out there that can't be ignited for some reason or another, but otherwise, this is just really powerful instant uptime for that sort of thing. And then Pulling Strike against burning enemies. So when you ignite them, if they're on 10% or less HP, they just die. Good, very good. As would be expected of a Scion, so far, you can really just play anything on here, as long as you let the nodes lead you to what you're doing, not the other way around. That's kind of why you need to have experience. You have to see what these things have their natural synergies for, and you have to pursue them. You can't just decide you're going to play Heavy Strike and figure it out. I mean, that probably worked, to be perfectly honest, for one reason or another. But you have to understand how to be able to like make use of a given skill, and for a new player, that's going to be very difficult. That kind of goes doubly so when we get to the last part of this, the Jewelry Wheel. And yes, we're back again. We are talking so much about Scavenger, but Scavenger is the densest of the Ascendancy, so apologies for that in advance. Tainted Pact is an amulet that gives you, I mean, it gives you this effect. This is kind of what it's known for. Taking chaos damage over time heals you instead while leeching life. Very good with situations where you're poisoned. It is kind of a situational effect, though, with something like the Golden Rule, which reflects your poisons back to you on a build where you are poisoning. This is much more interesting all of a sudden. You can turn that into additional regeneration for your character. So it's not a bad effect by any means. It's just not very exciting. Fury Valve, I would say, is a bit more exciting. Split is a very interesting way to handle projectiles. Basically, instead of shooting a whole bunch, you're going to shoot one and it's going to explode off the enemy. And typically it will fly towards other enemies. If there's no other enemies around, though, that effect might feel wasted. The way around that, traditionally, is to get effects that will let you ricochet off of terrain. So you'll hit the enemy, it'll split, and then it'll chain back to the enemy. And then chain in general, because split always happens first in the order of operations, will allow you to shoot at an enemy, it'll split, and some of those projectiles might come back immediately afterwards and hit that enemy again. Very good for like blowing up rares for certain skills. This can be very strong with Lightning Arrow. Fury Valve isn't the most played item, but part of that is because it's on an amulet, and you don't want to give up your amulet for this effect. And it gives you an inherent 2 additional projectiles, so if you get that environmental chaining going, this can be very strong. Dodri's Tongue exists. That's about all I have to say about it. This is not a good effect. It's conditional. If the enemy is not cursed yet, It doesn't do anything. And if you curse them, it doesn't like remove an ailment retroactively. So I don't like this at all. I don't recommend it, and I'm just going to move on. Leadership's Price, on the other hand, is an example of a good amulet. So having it here like this, without even having to use the amulet, is also very good. Although Leadership's Price is kind of a slot machine item where getting good rolls is very expensive, but worthwhile. If you don't care about the rolls, in this case, you don't, because you don't have to wear the item. The effect here that they give you is very strong. It removes Ignite, Chill, Freeze, and Shock, but as long as you can get your two highest attributes equal, which that is a bit of opportunity cost to consider, you get Scorching, Brittle, and Sapping Conflux, which means all of your damage will contribute to these effects, and what these effects do is very strong. Scorch causes enemies to have inherently less resistance, and it's applied to them as a debuff, so there are certain things where this stacks a little better than, say, Elemental Penetration, because there are ways to exacerbate this. Brittle gives enemies a debuff where you have bonus flat crit against them. So if you have 5% crit on your weapon and you put a big brittle on them, now it's like 8% base crit. And then if you have 300% increased critical strike, instead of 5 becoming 20, 8 becomes 32. So you start to see where brittle becomes a very strong scaling option for making your crit build stronger. And then sapping is kind of almost, in my opinion, the favorite of the three. Sap is hard to get, but when you sap an enemy, it reduces the damage they deal, and the value can get pretty large. I believe it's like up to 20%. Yes, 20% less damage from sap. Combine that with some other effects, and you can turn bosses that are normally very scary into something that is much less scary. As long as you're not getting hit by like the obvious stuff you have to dodge, this will make them into kittens. Kittens that you beat up for loot. Death Rush. Death Rush is a ring that gives you adrenaline for 5 seconds on kill, and that's what this does as well. The fact that you don't have to give up for a ring makes this especially strong, because adrenaline is an incredibly strong buff. 25% increased attack, cast, and movement speed on its own is insane. Getting it on kill means that when you're mapping, you're going to be flying around the map much more quickly than normal, you're going to have incredible quality of life, and then 100% increased damage and 10% additional physical damage reduction also helps with that a whole lot. Additional physical damage reduction on a lot of characters is most valuable in mapping. On a character that stacks enough of that sort of stat, it's actually more valuable against bosses because then you can avoid certain one-shots. But otherwise, this in general is just very good. And there are ways to get on-kill effects to proc during bosses, like the Writhing Jar Flask with the worms. So this has a lot of potential just in general as a very generalist good node. And finally, Xerfe's Heart. Chaos damage can ignite, chill, and shock. I don't have a lot to say about this. It's a strong binary effect. As far as I know, there's nothing that Xerfe's Heart does that is like special in an interaction. It just makes a chaos damage build stronger. One of the problems with Xerfe's Heart and its effect is that Hexblast exists, and Hexblast inherently has this ignite, freeze, shock effect for your chaos damage. So it's really not as strong as it used to be, but if you're not playing Hexblast and you want this effect, this is a way to get it. There are other skills in the game and other ways of building characters. Replica Alberon's Warpath is a good example of this. You stack strength and you get a bunch of flat chaos damage, and giving yourself things like, shock is quite good. Those are benefits you can make use of to like make that build much stronger, and you could certainly consider Xerfe's Heart for it. I can't entirely say how good this is compared to everything else. Fury Valve and Death Rush just seem so generically good, but at the same time, nothing here on this, like the end side of the tree, is crazy powerful, except I think maybe Fury Valve with enough investment is. Fury Valve is like actually kind of wild. We're only just now getting to Bog Shaman. I feel like I should split this into 2 videos. All right, this is the movie. Ascendancy review, the movie. Bog Shaman overall has very, I want to call it Blood Mage vibes from Path of Exile 2. It's not. What it does is very strong though, and we're going to get right into that, starting with Venom Drinker, because getting poisoned for benefit is something that has existed in the game in a very large way for a long time. A really good example of this is the Golden Rule. I like this jewel a lot. It kind of doesn't seem like it works here, because this caps the amount of poisons you can have, which on its own is kind of a benefit. But the golden... Oop, that's the wrong item. The Golden Rule does do something here that is very important. Specifically, it reflects the poison that you deal back to you. So you don't have to rely on an enemy hitting you anymore. You can guarantee the poison is happening as long as you yourself are poisoning. And that itself opens up other opportunities. Icefang Orbit makes it so that when you are poisoned, you are also chilled. And you can scale the effect of that chill you're hitting yourself with for Winterweave. How many times does this ring come up? which reverses the effect of chill. So you can give up your ring slots now and a jewel slot to give yourself a giant action speed buff, and also a pretty decent bonus to your poison damage. So that's kind of all right value on its own. These items have things on them that like are kind of generally desirable as well. A little bit of resistance at least, some life. Ice Fang Orbit also has corpse removal, which is not a stat you sleep on. Things like porcupines won't explode when they die if you're doing an Ice Fang Orbit strat. But in addition to that, you also have a couple pairs of boots that give you bonuses if you're poisoned. I don't know why there's multiple pairs of boots that do this, but there are, and it's pretty fantastic. This one especially, Temptation Step, wants you to have 5 poisons on you, and it will even give you like a way to cement applying those poisons to you up to 5, specifically with travel skills. So if you have a way to poison with, say, Whirling Blades or Shield Charge, this will let you get those poisons on you very quickly. Obviously, getting hit or the Golden Rule also work, but we're talking 50% movement speed, 75% damage, and it gives you Chaos Res, which is very useful. Additionally, Replica Red Trail, which gives you power charge generation. It gives you more Chaos Res as long as you're standing still. And the stats of the boots themselves are actually pretty good. It's got an okay armor value, 30% movement speed, life, kind of everything you want. But what really comes to mind is probably the item that was like the direct inspiration for this node, and that's Apep Supremacy. There's a baby version of this called Apep Slumber as well, which does slightly different things, so you kind of pick the one you want most. But this is another +3 all maximum resistances. That's 8 now, if you commit the shield. This is something you really want to consider, depending on what your character does, because first of all, you get a very sizable energy shield regeneration buff from being poisoned with this. And chaos damage does not typically go through energy shield, so that's kind of good. But also, if you have an effect like Chevron's, blocking, or rather making it so your chaos damage does hit your energy shield, this becomes very strong. It kind of negates the damage of the poison even more, or if you're CI, which you can be, right? You're just immune to chaos damage while you're poisoned. This is just pure benefit. And I want to say specifically, actually, let's pull this up. Specifically, CI with Apep Slumber and Incandescent Heart will give you a tremendous amount of elemental damage reduction, because now you're talking about 8% to all maximum resistances. That does include chaos, by the way. And then also 25% of elemental damage from hits taken as chaos. But if you're CI, right, you're immune to chaos damage, so this is actually just 25% less elemental damage taken. So you've got some powerful defensive combos here. Outside of that, Fel Fen is kind of a weird node to me. It changes enemies' chaos resistance to 0, but this is a binary effect, and I feel like getting an enemy's chaos resistance to negative isn't that hard. At the same time, it might be that hard just for the curse. This lets you ignore that curse, and penetration still works with this, but you can't do anything else that would reduce an enemy's chaos resistance, so it's hard for me to say how good this is. It also sets your chaos resistance to 0. In the best case scenario, that means that your chaos resistance is +60 from the normal -60. So that's good, don't get me wrong, but I would rather have positive chaos resistance if possible. To kind of remedy that though is Sanguine Power, which all of these nodes so far have been 2-pointers that you can just go grab. Most of the stuff on this tree is like that. There's a little bit of choice nodes going on here that kind of have prerequisites, but Sanguine Power, this, so first of all, -3 maximum life per level. You get, I believe it's plus 1200 total life from level ups, because it's 12 per level. So you lose 300 life at level 100. That's not a big deal when your energy shield items are giving you flat life as well, which that's right out of Blood Mage. And honestly, this is a pretty powerful effect. You can get your maximum life to a very high value, which for anyone who's played the game knows, the higher your total life, the more effective regeneration is if it's percentage based. So if you get to like 10% regen and you have 10,000 life, you're regenerating 1,000 life a second. That's just a small example. Obviously, more effective life is good. And also, there are some effects in the game that give you, I would say, a stronger effect total from stacking life this way. Dissolution of the Flesh here comes to mind right away. That gives you a more maximum life modifier. And it changes the way you deal with incoming damage so that life lost is now reserved until you take no damage for a little while. It also sets your energy shield to 0. So we're talking about two powerful effects with the same downside. Those two things immediately want to be friends with each other, especially when they like inherently synergize with making the most out of this stat here. The remaining 2-point node is Eerie Silence. I'm a little soft on this one. I'm like not terribly excited. Pacify inherently is kind of interesting in a bossing scenario, right? You put it on them, and towards the end of the curse's life, the last 40%, that enemy just won't deal damage. That's very powerful against the boss. And then having it so that they also take 30% increased damage is really good value. The only issue is this is going to feel clunky to use. And if someone figures out how to make this work smoothly, it's an incredibly powerful node. If you don't know how to make this work smoothly, it's clunky, and you might find that it's not there when you need it, or trying to get it working in the middle of a fight could be the thing that gets you killed. So generally, I think these things feel pretty bad to use, but I'm sure someone will prove me wrong. We're going to start with this 2-point cluster here, rather 4-point cluster here. Toad Pact, which I love the name of for starters, really fits the Bog Shaman aesthetic. Minus 20% to all elemental resistances, fitting the theme of downsides all over the place in this tree. But what it does is big. 50% increased projectile speed, 50% increased AoE, 50% increased skill effect duration. I mean, the use cases for this are pretty wild. I kind of hate that it's projectile speed and area effect together, because projectile speed is like a negative synergy stat for, say, Ball Lightning, and now you're definitely not using Ball Lightning on this character, but 50% AoE is like more damage for Ball Lightning. So it would have been really powerful if you could somehow curb the effect of that bonus. Additionally, I said this in a previous video, skills like Stormburst get crazy good scaling off of skill effect duration. It's effectively a more damage multiplier for that skill. So there's a lot of quality of life here, but also a lot of raw power as long as you find the right skill to use it with. Now, if I had to guess, the right skill to use it with is going to be like Viper Strike or Viper Strike of the Mamba, because the node after it gives you 40% more damage over time. That's like one of the bigger damage bonuses you can get from an ascendancy. You do lose 5% of your life per second if you've been hit recently. I mean, that's no joke. You have to cover a lot of regen to make that work, but I think most people would say 5% regen for 40% more damage over time is a fair trade. And the reason I bring up Viper Strike specifically is because skill effect duration in particular, both A, increases your wither uptime, and B, skill effect duration actually affects your poisons if it's used by those skills. So this is a ton of damage, a ton of like quality of life. Even the AoE is good for getting your melee splash to kind of be more effective. So that's very nice. The other, I think, rather obvious choice, probably Ben is losing his mind over like Toxic Rain. I'm sure there's some breakpoint you have to figure out with the AoE and everything, but skill effect duration and AoE both synergize very well, and that is another damage over time skill. All right. I don't know what to call these three nodes here. I would say usually when you have a big cluster like this, there's something very powerful about it that draws most players to it. But honestly, I think the strongest thing in this wheel is the first point here. Nearby enemies have malediction. You can honestly ignore this second line of text, although Blasphemy Curses is like a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of it. Malediction on its own is such a generically strong buff. 10% reduced damage dealt and 10% increased damage taken. 10% reduced damage dealt should never ever be slept on. Anytime you can reduce an enemy's like outgoing damage in a way that you can't normally, that's like, I mean, this is kind of like the spellcaster version of Fortify as far as I'm concerned. If you add in Enfeeble on top of this, you're having a lot of fun. But because you have Reservation, and getting more Reservation on the tree isn't that hard, you get this, and then you get like Temp Chains, right? And then you're playing Viper Strike of the Mamba, and you're getting all of this damage over here, and suddenly, you really just need this 2-pointer to get a ton of value. You don't have to go for the other stuff. Although the other stuff can be quite strong. On the right here, we have Nightblood. Nightblood gives you skills gain a base life cost equal to 25% of the mana cost, which is important. It's base cost, which it's a lot of extra words to basically say your support gems are going to scale the cost of the life the same as the mana, which is good because you want it to cost more because that adds physical damage to your spells. It does have to be spells. That is kind of an important thing to keep in mind here. You can't do Viper Strike stuff or Toxic Rain stuff and take this as well. Although Toxic Rain wouldn't want this. Viper Strike would. On the other hand, we have Rotten Core, which is going to be horrendously blocked by my camera, unfortunately. This works almost just like Nightblood, but on opposite day. Your skills will deal 100% of the mana cost to you as physical damage. But you get added cast damage equal to 40% of the mana cost. The other very important thing here is this is not spell specific. So you could use this with Viper Strike, and chaos damage also scales poisons. I don't think you'd want to use it with Toxic Rain again, because Toxic Rain isn't a hit skill, it just creates a degen. So Rotten Core, I would say, is the more exciting of the two, although Nightblood is probably easier to manage for most characters. But generally speaking, Both of these are not going to be hard to get working if you're running something like Sanguine Power and you have a ton of life regen, which this tree kind of demands. So you could very easily take Sanguine Power, Venom Drinker, right, to get your free maximum resistances, and then Vile Imperfections and either Nightblood or Rotten Core, and scale the hell out of your damage, and just kind of be able to handle the degen that's coming into your life pool. But overall, this tree is going to require a certain degree of give or take that's going to be uncomfortable until you're actually in practice. I don't know that you can really properly theory craft how this tree is going to work unless you find a way to fix your life regeneration to pay these costs in a way that is like absurd and overwhelming, which those do exist, and if you know those, more power to you. But otherwise, I would say be very careful theory crafting around this. Ancestral Commander. Okay. Trigger level 20 summon Spirit of Calm. Trigger level 20 summon Spirit of Kuturoa. We don't know what these do. There's 5 of them. It's a choice node. What we do know is that how you activate them is different. For instance, Spirit of Calm seems to be a little easier to activate. I think Totem's expiring does count as a death. I could be wrong on that. Some of them are like downright forcible. For instance, Rakiata, you just have to crit an enemy that's marked. Kilova, you just have to block damage from a unique enemy. I'm sure the effects are very strong. If it just outright summons the mob that you can like encounter in trial, okay. That's pretty strong. It's very hard to evaluate though, but it is a 2-pointer, so you can just kind of get this as a bonus and hopefully it's strong. If you have a way of activating this consistently, I imagine this is probably good for your leveling experience. But doing that on a first character is going to be kind of difficult, probably the exception being Spirit of Calm. Now, the rest of Ancestral Commander is just, in my opinion, kind of generically really good as long as you're leaning into what the flavor of the ascendancy is, except for Born Under Fire, which is just generically good for anyone. Nearby enemies convert 50% of their physical damage to fire. Remember how Cloak of Flame was good on Scavenger? This is better. Yeah, this is 50%. So 37.5% physical damage reduction off of 2 ascendancy points. That's pretty good, especially if you want to do something like Ignite yourself and use Moko's Embrace to give yourself tons of attack speed and movement speed. The other 2-point node is Forest of Ancestors, kind of covered up here by my camera. +1 to maximum number of summon totems is just good value. As long as you're running totems, that is going to give you some percentage more damage, at least for the totem using skill. And then 20% of damage from hits is taken from your nearest totem's life before you. That is a tremendously strong damage mitigation tool, and you can absolutely take it with Born Under Fire. Yeah, this is already a lot of defense available for very little investment. And there's more. It's not even the best part of the defense, because Ancestral Endurance, which is also 2 points, but it leads to a 4th pointer. 3 maximum endurance charges. This is pure bonkers energy that I don't know how to quantify. Each one of these endurance charges, as long as you have a way to get them, which there's tons of ways to get endurance charges without your ascendancy giving you access, is going to give you 4% reduced physical and elemental damage taken. So normally you get to 6. On this character, you get to 9. So instead of getting a very powerful 24% reduced damage taken, except for Chaos, this is 36. There are skills that like interact with endurance charges, and having lots of them. Discharge might see a comeback over this, because I mean, the more charges you have, the bigger the fire-based damage hit, so there's like ignite potential there for a build. And then you have skills like Tectonic Slam, where endurance charges directly affect the effectiveness of your like attack skill, where you get tons of AoE chance and fissuring branches, and just blowing up the entire screen is going to be incredibly easy for a character with this node, on top of the usual like defensive benefits. And then let's not forget that there's a transfigured version of Tectonic Slam that adds damage per endurance charge consumed. So 135% more damage instead of your usual 6 charge, just as like a big capstone finisher move. It's almost like a Val skill at home. It does eat all of your endurance charges, so you have to really come up with a way to like keep them pumping, but that's very doable, right? Red Blade Banner and Enduring Cry for infinite power, and just instantly every time. Incredible. And after you get those endurance charges, you can get Ancestral Defiance, which is going to give you missing unreserved life before being hit by an enemy. And this is crazy, because Defiance of Destiny exists. This is already an incredibly high value amulet. This is where that effect is coming from, like baseline in the game. What I think is really cool about this is you can get both for a total of 35%. And when you read how the mechanic works here, you see why this is so powerful. The effect that gives you missing life occurs after you get hit, but before it deals damage. So if you're really low on life, you get a huge boost to life before the actual damage comes in. This thing makes you, it doesn't actually make you immortal, but it's going to make you feel immortal. And the fact that you can get it baseline is incredible. The fact that you can get it and stack it with the actual amulet is nuts. I could see tons of people in hardcore all of a sudden looking at Marauder as a starter option. They're like, let's do that. Because Defiance of Destiny gets used a lot over there. This Ascendancy is very dense. We have 2 more 4-pointers to talk about. The first one is strike-based. It brings back an old strike mastery that has been missing from the game in, I think, every form for quite a while, where the images of additional strike targets will target from further away. This is ridiculously powerful for clear. This turns strike skills, like, I don't know, Smite, Infernal Blow, Molten Strike. This turns them into clear speed monsters. And then it also gives you +1 additional nearby enemy, just kind of baseline. So if you get the attack mastery with it, that's already +2, which is equivalent to the support gem without having to run it, and just, you're blowing up the screen. And then you can even get Ancestral Echo, which, little more nuance type skill. This gives you the effect of Warrior's Legacy, which this ring, I looked it up. Even now in Settlers, so many months into the league, is still like 20 to 30 chaos to get one. So it's an item with some standing power. If you use it correctly, it's effectively a more damage multiplier. It kind of hedges your bets against things that cause you to reposition because you move away. And as long as the boss hasn't moved too much, there's a high chance that when you hit them again, they'll also get hit by that. And it's almost like 100% more damage. And the place where this gets really noticeable is Flicker Strike. Against a big enough target, if you Flicker Strike around the enemy and you're getting far enough away each time, it actually is just 100% more damage. So incredible potential, and also really good for clear as well, because you can throw one shot and then just move on even if everything isn't dead. And it will also smack the area just to make sure, you know, in case anyone didn't stay down. Ancestral Echo, this is again very powerful, and it's going to enable strike skills in a way that, you know, I mean, giving up a ring slot is big opportunity cost. Finally, we have the Warcry nodes. First, you get Call of the Ancestors. Reduced Warcry speed is a pretty big downside, but it's manageable. You can absolutely deal with this. You can get enough Warcry speed to trivialize this loss. You cannot get this much cooldown recovery rate normally. And a big deal about that is if you have enough cooldown recovery rate, you can kind of get Enduring Cry to a point with enough duration as well, where like you can keep the buff up constantly if you need it. And it gives you a massive like increased life buff. And it's also what's giving you your endurance charges. So there's a lot of synergy right here just on this 2-point node with a lot of other things in the tree. If you commit, you get Death Rattle, which is going to give you clear on a character that maybe lacks it. Just, you have Corpse Explosions now, right? You have Detonate Dead when you Warcry. And your Warcries also open chests, which is a very powerful tool for clear speed as well, in kind of a funny sort of way if you're running like Expedition. This will pop open all the chests. If you're near a strongbox, you don't have to click it. You just Warcry and it pops open the chest. It gives you moments to use your Warcries, which you're going to have to be using constantly anyways, that will kind of save you time, which incredible quality of life and also clear speed. So kind of almost a memey, but incredibly effective node actually. That's Ancestral Commander. There's so much here, so much we don't even know yet, and yet I can confidently say this is a banger. This character is going to do melee really fantastically well. It's going to be incredibly durable, and it's going to make strike skills especially very good, but you can also play it with totems. You can also just invest in Warcries. You don't have to specifically go for one thing. As long as you're making use of some of these notables in more ways than just like their face value, you're going to get tremendous value on the character, and that's usually what pushes an ascendancy above its like normal weight class. And finally, Behemoth. I'm kind of so glad this exists. This is another ascendancy that funnels you through a node with a major downside. Rampager has a properly major downside. In fact, I would say this is the first one that almost kind of makes your character worse. The thing is, melee hits count as rampage kills really challenges that concept immediately, because for the first time ever, your rampage effects are affecting the boss. I love this so much, actually. I think it bears mentioning right away. Your spell skills deal no damage, your spells are disabled. This already exists on Gruthkill's Pelt. So by taking this ascendancy, you can use this body armor with no concerns. And I went ahead and I looked it up. I found some old forum posts, people talking about it. Gruthkill's Pelt does disable spells. It does not disable on-hit curse effects from implicits. So like if you have Corrupted Gloves, or you have curse on hit from like Shaper Elder Rings, that will work. And that's an important thing to consider, because usually you see spell skills are disabled Losing curses is one of the things that really kind of gets to people, like on top of auras and everything else. The fact that you can have those, though, really lessens the downside of this. Now, you have a lot of ways to go. We're going to start with the stuff that's right over here on the left and just keep it in the family. Dire Rampart, melee hits Fortify. That's, you just freed up a support gem, and you get some regen along with it. At 20 maximum fortification, this is 4% of life regenerated per second. That is already very good. Built-in Fortify and 4% regen is no joke. You can immediately start leaning on regen as a survivability resource that's going to get strong very fast. The thing is, Tireless Frenzy comes in immediately afterwards and kind of puts it over the top. The Celestial Brace exists, and I've used this pair of gloves on a character as well. It's kind of these 4 nodes of the Ascendancy minus the regen as a pair of gloves. So you could potentially get these and then spec out of those if you don't really care too much about the regen. But what's so nice about this is that maximum fortification takes a 20% less damage taken modifier and turns it into 30. It also gives you 30% attack speed. 30% attack speed is like, that's wild. That's so absurd, especially in an Ascendancy that you're going to find really wants attack speed. And you can get more max fortification from the tree. So you can push this value to a very high amount. And on top of all of that, you actually don't even have to give up your glove slot, which can also be very important. And as if all of that weren't good enough, you have Onslaught while fortified on the Perseverance belt shows up as well, which Onslaught is another one of those big time buffs that will make your character faster. But in this case, it's almost more important because you can't run a haste aura or auras in general. So these buffs hit a little harder than normal. At least that's my assessment from looking at this outside. And again, attack speed is very important. And we're going to talk about why by going to the top side of the tree. This, 2 points off the initial node that you have to go through, is Sheer Fury. The effect on Sheer Fury is nuts. First of all, 15 maximum rage takes, well, your normal maximum rage is 30. So this takes a 30% more attack damage multiplier and lets it go up to 45%. You can get even more maximum rage from the tree. You can also get stuff that will give you other benefits for your maximum rage. So you can really build around rage as something that will improve your character. And this gives you an effect with it that doesn't exist anywhere else. And there's a reason why that's a big deal. 15% chance that if you would gain rage on hit, you instead gain up to your maximum rage. This is Berserk. Berserk is not the only skill like this. A big part of Berserk is that each second you are losing more rage per second continuously, but it makes your rage do more things while it's active. That on its own is, I mean, it's very good. This is going to take that 45% more attack damage multiplier and increase its effectiveness by 60%. For those keeping score at home, that's like, I don't know, it puts it close to 70% more damage instead, while this is active. But honestly, I don't even think this is the best thing to go for if you're going to be making use of that. This is Rage Vortex. Rage Vortex is a very, very powerful kind of secondary melee skill that you use on a rage character to deal just, I don't know, tremendous amounts more damage. The downside of it is you have to sacrifice rage. Specifically, it will sacrifice 20% of it. That's an important thing to consider because it gets more powerful the more rage you sacrifice, so it rewards you for investing in maximum rage, of which we're already getting 15. So on top of all this, I want you to consider that Rage Vortex itself will generate rage on hit. What this means is that your Rage Vortex will sustain itself with enough investment. And in the case of a Cyclone character, your Rage Vortex of Berserking will help offset its own degen, which is where I think maybe you have something absurd here going, where with this node and Cyclone and Rage Vortex of Berserking, you are double Cyclone. You are cycloning while you're cycloning. And this is actually quite a bit stronger than Cyclone in my experience. You can also just use like any other skill as long as it hits frequently enough. But I like to bring up Cyclone because Cyclone hits very fast. It has that 300% base attack speed modifier. And it is going to be repeatedly proccing that gain maximum rage effect instead of just some. Creating situations where these skills have like increasing uptime is going to make your character very powerful. And then of course, if you like Hateforge, one of the most famous pair of gloves in the game, you can get this, which will personally, I don't terribly love this because you cannot gain rage during soul gain prevention is like, why not just use souls, right? Original Hateforge. Oh no, original Hateforge has that as well. I don't know. I don't think Hateforge has been what it has, like what it used to be for quite some time since they changed the way it works and how rage during soul gain prevention works. It's just kind of like, sure, I'm sure the people who know how to make this work for them are going to be like, this node is amazing, we can skip all this, but not really, because this is 50% increased rage cost of skills, and the gloves actually have, like, reduced So I don't think this is a very good node, but that's okay because I think Sheer Fury is absurdly good on its own. And that's like not even the primary way to play this Ascendancy, I think. Just as an aside, Final Blow, which is kind of another 2-pointer right off the Rampager node you have to go through. Weird unarmed focus nonsense going on here. I shouldn't say weird. I mean, Hollow Palm, 10% unarmed melee critical strike chance is really good. And what's more, it doesn't say base, it says plus. So with the right stats going on, I'm pretty sure you can get your base unarmed melee crit to like an absurd value and just go damage there. Personally, I've been pretty unenthusiastic about stuff like Facebreaker and Hollow Palm for a very long time. So this doesn't appeal to me very much, but for the people who like unarmed, I'm sure there's something here. You do always have to keep in mind, though, that you're not going to be having auras. And you have to give up so many gear slots for Hollow Palm, which is like the chief way to play unarmed right now. I'm not sure this is that good. I'm a little concerned about it. This might actually be, no, you're supposed to use Facebreakers, but I don't know that Facebreakers is good enough. Maybe with this much crit it is. You know, maybe it is. There is the Rigwald's Amulet, which gives you claw modifiers applying to unarmed and another 7% unarmed melee crit. At 17% melee crit, maybe Facebreakers works. Just maybe. Yeah, and then also modifiers to claw crit chance working for it too. It's, ooh. That might be spicy enough. You don't get an anoint that with this. Oh, no, you can. No, you can anoint this. I shouldn't say that. Corrupt oils, or whatever they're called, those exist now. So, okay, yeah, maybe. You know what? When I was looking at this first pass, I didn't think much of this, but now I'm thinking a little bit of it. You could probably punch the shit out of some people with this and that combined. Like, 17% base crit is like, you're going to reach crit cap at some point, and it's not going to be that hard. But personally, I think actually the most exciting part of this tree is over here. These nodes, and I say that because of a playstyle that I don't like. This is the group play part. The biggest downside of your spell skills being disabled is that you can't run auras. That does not mean you cannot be affected by allies' auras. So if you play the game and you like to fight as the big meathead who just attacks stuff, and you have a buddy who likes to play support and wants to play a paladin, go this way. And get mental conditioning, which is going to give you insane amounts of armor and let you stack mana with strength. So strength stacking now turns into armor through mana, which is a weird word salad to say, but right off of Steel Willed, you get increased attack damage per 450 armor, some double defend chance, and then also armor applying to chaos damage taken from hits. So you like kind of achieve a level of immortality with a support behind you. Not to mention, your guy's going to be running a link skill, because that's just how that works. And then on top of that, you have things like Replica Dreamfeather, which this was already kind of an item for builds that people would work around. And it's only 1%, but it's an additional 1% as well. So dual wielding these, maybe not dual wielding because maybe you want to use a shield, but now that's 3 or 4%, which is already kind of a sizable increase from what is available here. And then you have to consider some of the options that will give you very good armor in your body armor. The Brass Dome is kind of a, I don't really care about strength option. I'm just trying to get tons of armor option. So if you're not pushing that much strength to get mana to get armor, because that's so weird, this does help you with crit resistance. It gives you max res, and it gives you a very large amount of armor. The thing that I don't like about Brass Dome is that you can get body armors that are rare these days that have a lot more armor. And like, obviously this is kind of an absurd example, but that is a lot more than a Brass Dome. A Brass Dome doesn't get anywhere close to 5,000. On top of that, you have the Iron Fortress showing up here, which is like going all in on the strength stacking. So now strength is giving you armor, which is giving you damage, but also the damage bonus you get from strength is bigger. And that on its own is pretty good. You can probably get a ton of block chance off this. You won't be using it for spells, but at this point, who cares? It also comes with a very large strength bonus, so it actually has a little bit of competition going against the rares. The downside of it, obviously, is you lose a lot of armor here. You do have to kind of calculate how much mana you're getting as well, though, that is giving you armor, because 120 strength is going to be, what is that? 120 strength is going to be 480 flat mana, and then 80% of that is going to become armor, and then you're going to have maybe some increased mana notables working with it. So it's not as bad as it looks, but again, you can get very, very high values from a rare these days. Like here's 2 Divines for 4,700 armor. And it can have a strength roll. So I'm leaning more in that direction personally if I was going to do something with that. But this whole combo here seems pretty good. And I think what really pushes it over the top is that if you're playing with another person, they bring auras to the table, right? So you get all this armor, it's fueling your damage, it's making you incredibly survivable, and then they hit you with this aura effect juiced level 30 determination that's giving you like 2500 flat armor and like 100% more armor as well. It's crazy, right? Completely crazy. That said, I have been at this for a long time. That is everything, thank goodness. We have seen all the ascendancies. Scavenger was quite the thing to get through. Bog Shaman is all sorts of downsides with crazy upsides, but these ones I actually feel are pretty well balanced. Venom Drinker in particular is very easy to work around and has clear items that you can punch into it and just make it stronger. Sanguine Power is blood magic stuff from Poe 2 brought into Poe 1, which is a very nice thing to see. I quite enjoy that. There's lots of damage over time potential, so there's undeniably powerful builds that can be made here and a lot of good generic nodes to go with it. Some of the earlier reveals had very poor scaling generic nodes, and it created situations where getting 4 ascendancy notables wasn't that exciting. And I felt that was a major problem. Polytheist kind of had that problem. Gambler had that problem. This does not have that problem, and the effects are all powerful. As long as you can manage the downsides, this goes to the moon. This might even be S tier. It's very hard to say. Ancestral Commander, waiting to see what these do. I think there's some other trees that work that way, like level 20 Arath's Hooves, we don't know what that does. Level 20 Arakali Spiders, we don't know what those do. These especially though, I mean, obviously there's a suite of options here, and I'm guessing some of them are defensive, some of them are offensive. They might actually just summon the dude to fight with us though, which would also be very cool. But overall, incredible defensive options in this tree, and also good quality of life, right? Death Rattle is fantastic for like solving clear issues, and the opening chest link should not be slept on. If you've played with the mastery for spellcasting, you know how nice this is to have. I mean, Empyrean Gaming spent tons of divines recrafting his helmet to get this Warcry's open chest mod on a helmet, which I believe you can do through Kelger. So if you manage to get that on a helmet, oh no, I'm sorry, it was the graveyard stuff. Yeah, that was from Necropolis. But yeah, I mean, it was a very expensive recraft to make it happen. This is a lot of quality of life, and if you're doing the right kinds of content, this is not to be slept on at all. Your ability to make strike skills strong are huge, and you know what? First time through, I didn't even bring up Toughened Skin. I completely missed this notable. There's so much in Ancestral Commander, I missed an entire node. This is Juggernaut, more or less. In fact, I would say it's the best parts of Juggernaut in one node. Double armor from body armor, which there's an armor and energy shield mastery that will also give you 100% increased. Combining the two will quadruple the armor. So you get like a 1600 armor brass dome that's giving you +5 all max res and reducing the extra damage you take from crits. So greatness there, and then also this is chill and freeze immunity, more or less. Okay, maybe not technically immunity, but it keeps you from ever dropping below your base value. It's gonna feel like immunity, that's what I should say. It's basically immunity, but it also works on other things. Anything that lowers your action speed or your movement speed cannot stop you, period. So Toughened Skin, huge quality of life as well, and also huge survivability. Everything here is good. The problem with Ancestral Commander is choosing 4. And lastly, Behemoth kind of completing the spell skills disabled dream that Polytheist started. Very interesting ascendancy. Biggest thing to keep in mind, I would say, is you can get Curse on Hit from stuff, and if you have someone to play with, this gets a lot stronger. Even if you're not doing the armor stuff over here, just having someone to bring synergizing auras is going to take a character who gets very unique buffs and pushes them over the top, right? That's how you got to kind of think about it sometimes, is you can't get this stuff on other characters, but the stuff on other characters can be given to this character through them. Anyway, I'm exhausted. I got 3 hours of sleep last night, and I knew this was coming. I was going to take a nap, but they kind of dropped the reveal early. I almost feel lightheaded right now because I've been talking for an hour and a half. Hopefully this is cut down to something much smaller. Either way, I am so excited. I will be seeing you all on the 20th. I'll probably be streaming here on YouTube, and I hope to have a build guide out for Val Domination as an Architect of Chaos sometime soon. My preliminary POB stuff I did a few days ago very easily got that build up to 2 million DPS in with very few items that I would say are considered prohibitively hard to find. It's going to be kind of solo self-found friendly because it'll be the first time I've ever played a dominating blow build where Empower is not necessary, nor is a Legion Jewel. Although I'm still going to want a Legion Jewel, so. I may be playing Soul Self-Found. I may not be, actually. My buddy Nino got back to me, and he's going to want a League start with me, so if that happens, I'm back into trade, and at that point, anything's on the table. Anyway, have a good one, Exiles.